pick.
All righty, welcome to another episode of On the Clock, your Just Baseball College and MLB Draft podcast. I'm Jared. We got Tyler with us, but we have a very, very special guest with us today. Brian Bridges, the Director of Amateur Scouting with the Kansas City Royals. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you on, dive into the MLB Draft a little bit, and just kind of have a more in-depth conversation about a player evaluation. But first, just for the viewers don't know you, you've had a long journey in Major League Baseball. Just give us a little bit of background on you and kind of how you've gotten to where you are today.
Yeah, it was crazy, right? So I was always coaching in the Cape Cod League. Started in '97 with Kevin O'Sullivan, who's actually the head coach at Florida. So we were up in Bourne together, and we had Mark Mulder, Brandon Inge. Our bullpen was like one of the best bullpens in the whole league, and Peter Gammons actually did Baseball Tonight from there and compared our bullpen to Major League bullpens. It was really good. I mean, we hit like 199 as a team and won 25 games in the Cape. So I can tell you what kind of pitching it was. But with that came a lot of attention and meeting a lot of scouts, scouting directors, and being asked about players throughout the league. That's when Chase Utley and a lot of guys were up in the Cape. So I always thought I was going to stick with college coaching, make a difference in players' lives, and go that route. Well, at that time, there wasn't a lot of money in college coaching. I mean, 15, 20,000 is like the third guy. It's changed so much over the course of time. But so that was 4 years of coaching and getting to know those guys. And I'd interviewed with Donnie Rowland, who was with the Anaheim Angels to start with. Then that year, of course, I didn't get the job. It became a running joke. I almost interviewed with every team in Major League Baseball before, I got a job. But Wayne Britton was with the Red Sox, and it looked like I was going to get close to getting a job with them. And then he wasn't allowed to be given the money for me to do North Florida for him. So here we are again. And Danny Montgomery with the Rockies, same area, right? I was living in Lakeland, Florida at the time. And he said, hey, dog, we're going to do this. You come recommended by a few guys I'm close to, Wayne Britton, all these guys. Well, he hires me, and then Billy Schmidt says we couldn't get the money to hire me, so I was hired and fired in the same day. So then fast forward, 99, Donnie Rowland calls me out of the blue and says, hey, I got a job for you, but you're going to have to move. And I was like, where? He said, Chicago. I'm like, man, I'm born and raised in Florida. How's this going to work, right? So, but if you want to do anything, there's sacrifices that have to be made. A lot of people nowadays want what they want, but they don't want to make the sacrifices to do it. So I moved up there, learned the area, met a lot of scouts, a lot of, old school guys. So worked with the Angels from 2000 to 2003 up in the north or up in the upper Midwest. Met Joe Jordan at the time, who was with the Marlins. And, they had an opening in Georgia. So I was like, hey, it gives me a chance to get a little closer to home. It gets warmer throughout the spring. So a little more my cup of tea. So moved with those guys down there from 2003 to 2007 when Roy Clark approached me. And, he had a change in the Georgia area scout and wanted me to be the Georgia area scout for the Atlanta Braves. So I started, in 2007 with those guys all the way up, worked my way through it to, when I got fired by Alex Anthopoulos in 2019. But I worked for Roy and then Tony DeMacio, another good scouting director who had Paul Snyder back in there. So to get you to where I am today, I've been very fortunate in my years of being a scout because no matter what your title is, you're still a scout first. Titles don't matter. So I always look at it that way. But I mean, you take Donnie Rowland, who's the one that broke me in, Stan Meek, who's one of the best with the Marlins, Tony DeMacio, and Roy Clark. And then I had Paul Snyder as my personal cross-checker, which was like, and he taught me so much. And I thank Tony for that, for him allowing that to happen. Like looking back, that's, where it all started. So like my growth. Then there was change, and then John Capuella got the job. John Hart took over. Then I got promoted to scouting director. Well, Frank Wren promoted me to like a pseudo cross checker, and then I became the scouting director in the fall of 14. Jumped right in, had a few good drafts, got lucky, players lined up. And our whole goal was to try to win a World Series.
Yeah.
I wanted to win a World Series. First thing I wanted to do, small goals, was I live in Rome, Georgia, so I wanted to win another championship in Rome. They did it in 2016. And then that team subsequently became the team with some younger pitching behind it in the draft that ended up winning that World Series. So, sitting on the couch, I remember when they won it in 21, my wife was like sitting in the recliner and I was sitting on the couch, and she said, "What's it feel like?" I said, I just smiled, because a lot of those guys I knew when they were just babies. So it was one of those things that, she was just like, I just told her, I said, "It's complete, it's over with." And then, Alex comes on, of course, he wants to do his own thing. So he let me go. That's fine. As general manager, they have their right to do that. And then Michael Holmes, who I'd met on the trail, drugged me out of that ditch and brought me over there with the San Francisco Giants. I learned a lot from Farhan and Paul Bien on the analytics side. Paul's very thorough, and which helped me because I was a pure just, scout. I wasn't really taught like what Paul and Farhan taught me on, the analytics and, seeing players' names on axes and like comparisons and all that. And I never really had it explained to me till then. So worked for them for 5 years, and then here we are. So second year with the Royals, and, I think JJ, probably not enough, and Danny Onoveros and Lonnie Goldberg for giving me this opportunity, and having those guys around to bounce stuff off of has been great. I was on the phone with Lonnie this morning. They're working hard to try to make the club better at the major league level, or make the organization as a whole better. So that's kind of where we are. We just finished up our second draft, and actually I'd seen you on TikTok, and I didn't really think about it, but the one thing that you said that like shocked me was like, "Hey, they went for athletes," and I was like, honestly, I didn't even think about that. It just worked out that way, and it was like, because it was one of the more, you're picking 23, so you're trying to pick, when you start going through it, you're trying to pick the best available players for the organization. So that's where we are.
I love it. Tyler, I'll turn over to you. I know you got a few questions.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned, despite the title, you're a scout first. And then obviously blending in analytics on the side of that. But like, what is the scouting philosophy for you? Like, what kind of scouting pillars do you have personally? And how do you navigate having that old school mentality of a scout, but also trying to blend in with the new analytics push that we have ongoing in scouting nowadays?
Well, my pillars probably are athletes, arm action and deliveries, because we're getting away from, and I will say this, as far as we're moving into this training first instead of baseball, everybody's training, right? Mm-hmm. So they're training. Are you training to be a starter, or are you just training to throw hard? And I think we're getting away from a starter delivery and a more full throttle, reliever look type delivery, which it's getting harder and harder. And, I've had this conversation just talking about the pitcher side. One thing I will tell you is I told our guys out in Arizona just this week, I was like, you guys are going to have to start finding some starters here. These guys that we think have starter traits, athleticism, and, move okay through, what our people see down there on, the how the body moves, the bio side of things. We're going to have to start developing our own starters, whether it be high school or college, because they're not coming up that way. So there's one little piece of tying everything in moving forward. I mean, the year I took Ian Anderson, Joey Wentz, Kyle Muller, and Bryce Wilson in Atlanta, those all had starter deliveries. And as you move further away from 2016, it's getting harder and harder to find. So with that, and then tying in the analytics, we're all inclusive in our draft room. I'll kind of tell you guys a little bit how it goes. The cross-checker explains the player, like gives a background, what he is, who he thinks he is in the big leagues. Then we go right to analytics. They describe what he is from an analytical standpoint. Then we go to behavioral science, what Ryan made, and he talks about the person that he's met, try to get, because you want to get like players. So we go through that. So that makeup piece is important. Social media, where, kids put stuff on there and they don't realize at the time and they forget about it because it was like 10 years ago. You try to make sure, and you try to coach these kids, hey, make sure you looked at your social media. You don't have anything on there that it can come back to bite you. And Ryan does all that, gets to know the players too, as well as our area scouts. So it's a cross-reference between what the area scouts got in home and what Ryan's got when he met with, and then we go medically. So we tie all that into every player. I think we had 954 players on our board this year, and we went over probably thoroughly close to 400, in 10 days. So if that answers your question, you have a follow-up question to it, I was trying to be as thorough as I could. Now, on the player side, it's athletes with upside. Jack was a freak. Okay. I mean, you run across a freak, sometimes you better, not pass on them. And the late Clay Daniels, who signed a bunch of guys internationally, he told me, Bridgie, when they hit him further than everybody else, you might want to pay attention. Not everybody's got that kind of power. So, just listening to people I learned from.
No, I think that's perfect and answers everything perfectly. And I like that you bring up like the social media aspect of everything too, because I think that's what people kind of don't understand at home, that makeup is a very valuable part of scouting. And it really just translates to everyday life too, where anything social media wise negative or will be a detrimental to you in some way, shape, or form in the future. And I think that's like a perfect way to kind of tie in everything for the common viewer at home, to where, this isn't just like, work life or anything like that. This does interpret or is interpreted in how, players are evaluated and everything like that.
Yeah, everything. It's all inclusive. Parents are important too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When mama says, I think my son's ready to do this, then you can pretty much put a stamp on that child. If she's a little hesitant and said he might need school first, you might want to listen to that. So it's the whole dynamic of the family piece too. And that's important for the area scout to get in that home and get to know the players best they can.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to ask, because you mentioned Jack being a freak of nature, and that's, insanely true. Is there any other player that you consider that same kind of freak athlete or freak of nature that you've drafted in the past with the Braves, Giants, anyone like that?
It's crazy when you talk about the makeup piece. It came down to two players from Michael Holmes, Bryce Eldridge and Aiden Miller. And there was a lot of discussion over those two players, in that draft. Both of them unique on two different ways. When you talk about someone who's done something that no one's ever really done, Aiden Miller hit 402 for Team USA as an 18-year-old. I mean, I don't know if that's ever happened, but I was like, I can lay my head on the pillow at night and know I feel pretty good about Aiden Miller's bat. And then on the flip side, Bryce Eldridge had such good makeup and was driven, and he had that freakish power as well. So I would say the decision came down. I'm glad it wasn't my decision. I think both clubs now, looking back, are very pleased. The Phillies have gotten him, Aiden, and he's doing well. And, Bryce Eldridge is right there on the verge. So, yeah, I would say like from a comparison for, the audience, it would be those two players that are like in recent memory.
Yeah, I liked it, especially considering how good that 23 class was. Looking back on it now, like just freakish throughout that first round, man. That was a really good class.
Yeah.
Do want to kind of dive into the 2025 draft real
Okay.
quick. Having the 2 picks at 23 and 28 definitely allowed you guys to be more creative this year.
Yeah.
And I really do like the approach that you guys took with taking 2 high upside prep bats in that range. So kind of talk about those 2 and what really boiled down to selecting those 2 guys and what makes them similar in a way.
What makes them similar in a way? They're both driven players. They're both very good kids. They're goal oriented. They know what they want to do. Their willingness to learn. They're both athletic. They're both gifted in their own way. Sean has, been compared to, we have a lot of guys have compared him to a lot of different people. He's like, and I was just talking to him last night at dinner about it. I said, you're being compared to everybody. I mean, everybody's got you got a little piece of this guy and then a little piece of this guy. And, I'm like, and I was like, I'll just be glad when you're in the big leagues as Sean Gamble and I don't have to sit here and, piecing together. People talk about Duran, and Boston. So he's very athletic. He's went out to the outfield, and was working with our outfield instructor, Rusty Kuntz, who's one of the best in the game, 49 years in the game.
Yeah.
And he's out there running around, and they brought him into the infield. And, he's taking ground balls, and they got to see, he's got elite range, and, he's quick on his feet. And so both of them are hardworking. Both of them are driven. The other one's being compared to, obviously, my guy, Austin Riley. And, there's some Josh Donaldson in there, some Trevor Story in there. So, I mean, you start looking at those 2 guys. And when you can compare them, I guess, to a bunch of different players, that's a good thing. It's not like this guy just reminds me of one guy, get a chance. So from that standpoint, they have a lot of like qualities, and, we're fortunate enough to get both of them.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. And I do want to ask this as a follow-up question because you mentioned comparisons and how you want the kid to be his own person. I will admit I suck at comparisons. So and maybe it's because I'm still, fresh to the game and whatever. But for you, taking comparisons from your area scouts or anybody else you work with, how much is that, evaluated when you go to look at these players and select them?
It does. I always said this: if a comparison hits you right over the head, like you go, hey, this guy reminds me of Josh Donaldson. I saw him as an amateur. When it hits you like that, you're probably on to something. If you're having to struggle to come up with a comp, it's kind of a check and balances with your own evaluation, I guess, as a scout. So not to mean that it's right or wrong, but, it's crazy. When you start, like you talk about, you want to go back to comparing, I've always said this, Austin Riley, Buster Posey did not want to pitch. Buster Posey could have been the best pitcher on the face of the earth. He knew how to pitch. He knew how to set guys up. He was up to 95, 96. And that spring, he pitched well enough to win his games. But ultimately, Buster didn't want to pitch. He wanted to hit. And I was so smart as a scout. I'll give you all a story. I was really smart. When we were coaching at the East Coast Showcase, I was the manager. And we're playing a Florida team that had Latos on the mound. It was like late. They had a starter, and then they had Latos. So I told Al Getz, who's now a agent, I was like, Al, if we get the bases loaded, Buster's going to pinch hit. Now, I said this. Now, Buster had already pitched, so I was like, I'm going to bring him up to pinch hit. So sure enough, I call the kid back, and I was like, "You can't do that. We're in the showcase." I'm like, "We're playing the Florida bunch. I want to win." So I was so smart as a scout to put Buster at the plate, who tripled in the right center. We ended up winning the game, by the way. He cleared the bases. I was smart enough to put him up to bat, but I wasn't smart enough to scout him as a hitter. So to tell you and everybody how hard it is as a scout, that's the most difficult because you have a decision to make, and that's when the draft was in June. So then you fast forward, and David Krausen goes and sees Buster with me, who's now a national cross checker with Philly. And he was my cross checker at the time. So we go, and Buster's just tossing it in there about 90, 93, did whatever he had to do to win, whatever. So we're driving back, and that's one of those trips as an area scout. You're sitting behind the wheel, and you got your national cross checker who's not far from you in the seat right next to you. And we drove all the way down to South Georgia to see him. And well, on the way back, I said, well, I don't know what question's about to come my way, but I got to have an answer. So David goes, what do you want me to do with this? He's 90, 93, blah, blah, blah. I said, David, I don't care what you do with it. Just in the summation at the bottom, write HOF. And that's when he was in high school. So fast forward, I knew the person. So if it tells you one thing, I knew Buster was a winner, even in high school. I just wasn't smart enough as an area scout to figure it all out and put all the pieces of the puzzle together. But he's had a wonderful career and probably will be a Hall of Famer. But, it's one thing, like that comparison thing. So fast forward, here comes Austin Riley. I'm at Fellowship Christian. He gets up to bat. Well, he's pitching. He's like 94 or 96 for the Doolin Dodgers on the mound, same day. Then he comes up and hits a ball over the lights down in the other parking lot. And I go, wait a minute, here we go. Clay Daniel told me, let's tie all this together. See somebody hit balls further than most, you might want to pay attention. So I do that. And I'm like, I tell Sean Rooney at the time, who's our national guy who's working over here with us. I was like, hey, man, I can't make this mistake again. He goes, what are you talking about? I go, well, I'm screwed up with Buster. I said, I'm not doing it again. This dude hit a ball 5 miles. And I said, we got to scout him in the spring as a hitter. So I sent Roy Clark to the LaGrange tournaments. If you remember that year, there was everybody down there. There was like all kinds of players down there in that year. So I sent him down there, and I said, you watch Austin Riley play every game and tell me what you think. I want you to see him pitch. I want you to see every game he plays. He said, okay, I'll do it. And I said, then call me when it's over. So he calls me, and he's going through all these other players, and he gets Austin. And he goes, hey, I saw him pitch. He goes, Coach, hey, I don't know. And I said, you don't have to say anything else. He goes, that boy can hit. So when he said that, we were at the NHSI, and I see Austin come into the cage. I said, I'm not screwing this up. Good Lord, I'm not screwing this up. I'm sticking to my guns. So I go, I'm passing him. Like, we're going to just like really in passing. I just kind of said, Austin, are you a pitcher or hitter? He said, hitter. And he kept walking one way, and I walked the other. And we didn't stop and chat or anything. And I said, all right, I'm all in. So if you really want to know about comparisons, there's your 2 scouting comparison stories. You have to learn from your mistakes, and you can't be scared to when that presents itself to ride that train again.
Yeah, that's how I model my philosophy after. It's like, don't be afraid to take a gamble on guys that you are confident in. Always feel fine with being wrong too. I think that's the biggest thing, like you had mentioned earlier, is like scouting, in my opinion, is 99% of being wrong. But when you hit that one time, like you had mentioned with Buster Posey being a future Hall of Famer and now Austin Riley, it feels damn good.
It does. It's a personal, hey, he got to the big leagues. Now, when we signed him, he was 0 for his first 23, so that was great. And I was like, here we go. But then Greg Walker goes down and works with him, and he takes off from there. So, and good for Austin. He's had a great career. And both of them are great people. I haven't talked to Buster in forever, but they had a lot of, again, back to what we originally talked about, they had like qualities. And to tie in, when I talked to Austin's mom at the game, I said, does he want to do this? And she said, he'll do anything on the face of the earth to play in the big leagues, even catch. And I said, stop right there. I'm good. So when I left there, so when you start tying all your experiences in, hey, for the success I've had as a scout, guys, I'll tell anybody, you better learn from your failures, because there's going to be more of them than there is success stories.
Amen. Hallelujah on that, man.
I love it.
That is just perfect way to describe everything. Jared, I'll let you take over, because I've been keeping you waiting in the wings for a little bit, but that is a great thing, and I'm going to take a lot away from that one.
Yeah, I love that. I wanted to touch a little bit more back on the 2025 draft. Just looking at the draft board, just were there surprises that happened? I'm sure there were tons, but like on players who went earlier than you expected, later than expected, how was that draft day for you all?
You know what? It was this one kind of played out more. It was scary, to be honest with you, because it got to a point where everybody was going ahead of the guys that I wanted, and they're all just sitting there. And I had a few conversations like with JJ and Danny and Lonnie and Renee Francisco outside, like, okay, I mean, we're not smarter than everybody else in the game. So these guys are sitting here. What if they're gone? We've already talked these scenarios. So you want to talk them in a small group. All right, I'm going to go here and here. You start talking about pivoting. But, there wasn't really any surprises. Picking 23, when it got down there was a group of pitchers together, and they all just went like boom, boom. It was like it just started blowing up, and I was like, oh no, now I'm not going to get any of these guys. And we were lucky to get the Lombardi kid.
Yeah.
So, that worked out. So a lot of those guys were probably going right there where, we had chosen them. And until you're picking 23 in every round, probably the worst part is you see a lot of players that your scouts had conviction in, and they're just gone.
Yeah.
It just blows up right in front of your face. And there was, our board held together for the most part, but I didn't see really any surprises. No.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to mention Lombardi too. I know Tyler got to catch him this year. Was it against Southern Miss when Tulane played Southern Miss?
ECU.
That's right. Talk a little bit about him, because I think both Tyler and I thought that was kind of our favorite player of the draft. Just an exciting arm to get there.
Yeah. Our guys were on, and Cody Clark, our area scouts, he's, Benny Latino, who has been doing this for a long time. He pulled me aside last year when I got the job. He goes, hey, I'm going to tell you one thing. This Cody Clark guy that you have shows up in places I never thought, there would be any scout, because he's so connected down in that Louisiana, Mississippi area. So Cody was on him from the jump, and he liked him. It's going to be tough to see him because of the innings, two-way player, athlete. Lonnie Goldberg goes to see him at Southern Miss. They cancel the game. There's no rain. The coach decides they're going to drive back to Tulane, and he's going to throw in like an inter squad. So Lonnie's driving all the way back, chasing the bus. It starts raining, and it's a mess. So we had him seen by a lot of people, and Sean Rooney and Tom McNamara, our pitching guys, had seen him at the end as well. So no one ever came out there and said no. Hey, there's upside here. This kid's driven. Then you meet the kid, and you're like blown away by who he is. Like he knows what he wants. He knows, what it's going to take to get there. He wants to be a starter. He's glad that he's done with the two-way now, and he can really learn. So the pillars are there for him to be successful, and we're fortunate enough to have him.
Yeah, I love that. One last question I'll ask about the 25 MLB draft, and then I'll turn it back to Tyler if he has any more kind of player evaluation questions. But I was going to ask kind of like, were there some late round or under the radar selections you're particularly excited about? But one guy I did want to chat about was Brooks Bryant. I know Tyler caught him at USA, and he was just incredible during the USA performance. I saw him a couple times out at Troy during the Sun Belt Conference. Just seems like an awesome kid, but would love to talk a little bit more about Bryant, but then any other guys in the later rounds you're excited about.
Yeah. Brooks has got a lot of power. I was just out in Arizona with him. I don't think I realized the amount of power he has. So if you can tap into that, and we had the best catching instructor in all of baseball, J.C. Boscone, who came over from the Braves. And, you know, if he can polish him up and get him where he needs to be, I think we got a steal there. So I think it's going to be power over bat. You know, what average to tick better arm, and, you know, average to tick better defense.
I like it. Is there any other late round guys you're pretty excited about?
Yes, you know, getting Max Martin, I think, in the 10th round. I think he was a good pickup for us. Van Dam, another good one. Alberini, you know, who analytically, I didn't realize it. I saw him early in the year at Globe Life. He was throwing bullets and, you know, threw a lot of strikes with a breaking ball, and I just liked how it came out of his hand. So you talk about them, but probably the one that's been untapped, and Paul Gibson, who's our pitching leadership down with, when we have an incredible pitching department. And here he had did some research, you know, where he came from. You know, he was a quarterback at that first school. It escapes me now, whatever the name of it was. But this guy's only got about 60 innings on his arm, even with having Tommy John.
Yeah.
He's athletic, and he just told him, he's like, you know, they always, when they onboard these kids, they have these meetings with them where the player tells them exactly what, you know, they want to do. And then, you know, for Van Dam, he was like, I don't know, you guys, I'm just clay here. I want to learn, and I want to, you know, find out. He goes, I know I can spin a breaking ball. And he said, but I don't know the finer points of pitching. So you talk about upside, and there's, you know, many more, I'm sure. But, you know, Van Dam sticks out. I know, you know, we have a lot of good arms that are down there, a lot of guys that have power. Dudley's got power. And, you know, a lot of those guys, even the D2 arm we got, they threw some bullpens the other day, and those guys said it was lights out. And you're, even after the draft sign, you know, getting him, you know, his first bullpen was really good too. So, you know, turning those guys over to our player development system, I feel really good about. And, you know, we came to terms with someone else that we a later pick, and you guys can figure that out. I just can't say it on here, but, you know, he hasn't signed. He'll sign today. But, you know, we're excited to have him as well. So even with, you know, some of the younger high school kids, you know, we feel really good about, you know, the mix that we had as a group, and the upside of some of these guys is really good. But I think the interesting story is to see just following Van Dam and see how it goes.
Yeah, I love it. Tyler, I'll turn it over if you have any last questions, and we'll dive into just a couple of fun ones and wrap it up.
Yeah. I had one more guy I wanted to ask about. It was Tyson Moran out of Canada. Yeah. He was a guy I caught like late in the cycle, really liked the swing. You mentioned athleticism being a pillar, and I felt like it was really athletic, adjustable. But I kind of want to get a deeper dive from you on that one, like how you thought about the kid moving forward. And I understand, you know, 13th round selection, but how happy are you to have him in the organization?
I am. You know, I heard a lot of buzz when I got down to spring training. He was playing, you know, with Team Canada, and he's going around hitting bombs off all these guys and I was like, once I saw him, I was like, that guy? And they're like, yeah, that guy. So he's taking BP, and we watched him play. Actually, Lonnie and myself watched him play. Really excited to have him. I think there's bat to ball there with him. There's, you know, he has a very good feel of what he's doing in the box. And you always say, you know, you can be an average athlete, but some guys are plus athletes in the box. So, you know, he does a lot of good things. He checks a lot of boxes. There's no fear, you know, when he's in the box. and he's athletic. So, having a chance, and Sterney, our guy that works with Team Canada, he knows a hitter when he sees one. So again, having guys like Adam and Rietsma, they make it a little easier because they cull through those guys and kind of put guys in front of us. But if you'd see him now, which is crazy, it's only been like 3 or 4 days, and I'm sure when you saw him, you're like, okay, I don't know where he's going to play defensively. He already looks so much better now. Like, he looks like an infielder now. So it's like weird. And it's only been 3 days. And sometimes we, take, and we got the Rasmussen kid from Tulane there with him at second base. So being able to see him do his thing at second, I think's helped Moran a ton. So, I mean, he doesn't even look like the same guy.
That's awesome. I'm hoping it all works out for both those guys too. So, Jared, that's all the questions I've got.
Yeah, I'll just wrap up with a couple more, kind of the fun questions. First one I'm going to ask is kind of take us inside the war room. What's the energy like of an MLB draft? Just whether it was at the Royals, Giants, Braves, whoever, what's it like on the day of the draft?
Well, there's a lot of excitement. I mean, it's your Christmas, right? And, the anticipation of who's going to be there, watching where players go. I think that is really when it starts taking, like when that first pick goes, the draft takes on a life of its own. And I was fortunate. I've been in every draft room since I've gotten in the game. So, back when you had to pull folders, that's all I did in Anaheim. It seemed like I had my head down in those folders finding names. But yeah, it's it's very exciting. And the one thing that I've really learned was you have to have these guys in somewhat of buckets, because as you're putting the board together, you want to be all inclusive, but you want to make sure that you're not trapping yourself. Not that you want the draft to go how you had it, but we've gone over it so much that your preparation, you have to be prepared for anything. And 2, it's almost like your very first Christmas.
Yeah.
Santa's coming, and here we go. I hope I get 4 or 5 things on my list. And that's kind of what you want in the draft. I mean, you hope you get all the gifts you want, and you do. You feel pretty good about it. But, and I think in every draft room, it's just the anticipation of, who are we going to take based on, who's available.
No, I love it. The last question I was going to ask, if you could go back and scout like any one legendary MLB player in their high school or college days, who would it be and why? It's a kind of loaded question, but
it is a loaded question. I played against Chipper Jones in high school, so that's not fair. Who would it be and why? If I had to go back, Dave Winfield.
I like that one.
Go back. So 3-sport guy, drafted in all 3. Are you going to be shy and back away and think he's going to go with a different sport, or are you going to go all in and push Big Dave?
I love that.
Yeah. I mean, think about that. So,
yeah,
you take the people thing in there, you meet Dave, he's probably intimidating, and you're an area scout and you're looking at Dave Winfield. I mean, come on. Well, he's not going to play baseball. He could play basketball, one of these other sports. So it's being convicted in a guy like Dave Winfield to go all in on the baseball side. Whoever did that, God bless him.
I love it. Brian, we can't thank you enough for taking time out of your schedule to come join us on the Clock. We know it's a busy time of the year after the draft wrapped up, but we really appreciate it.
It's Sean Gamble Day at the ballpark.
Yeah, I love it.
It'll be good. And then Josh's date's tomorrow. So, it's an exciting time around here, definitely for the kids. And it's like I say every year, and I'll speak for every scout around the country. You got to love the game. You got to love players, and you got to love to stare at a windshield.
I love it.
And if you do that, you'll be successful.
That's awesome.
It's a hard game to be successful at, but you got to get in that car and you got to go. So That's it for me, guys.
I appreciate it. And again, yeah, thank you for joining us. And we're looking forward to just following the Royals and all those guys from the 2025 draft.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks